I want to say first, thank you for joining another installation of the Young Black Physicians Black Doc Talk series, this one on mental health. We have some, our regular YBP members. I'm sure you'll recognize Dr. Elizabeth, Dr. Janelle. We'll be introducing them shortly, as well as our experts on the topics of mental health that we'll be discussing today. We'll be starting with just some objectives. We'll be talking about, some of the more common themes in mental health. We're talking about some of the challenges. We'll be talking about, different topics as far as access and some of the barriers to mental health in the community in a general sense, and maybe drilling down on a little bit more specific topics. But before we get all into that, we do have some housekeeping that needs to be done so we don't get in trouble. I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Elizabeth to let her bring you up to speed.
Thank you, sir. So like Dr. Nicholas said, we have some disclosures and disclaimers for you all today. As usual, we are not receiving any gifts or payments from pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology companies, health institutions, or any other private or public institution for today's event. All of the information shared here will solely reflect the views of the panelists, and this will include the panelists' research of nationally available information, as well as the panelists' own personal experiences. The views expressed in this video are not representative of our associated institutions. This is not to be taken as strict medical advice. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this platform is for general information purposes only. As always, please talk to your doctor or qualified healthcare provider for more information.
All right, very good. Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth. Dr. Janelle, did you want to just introduce yourself real quick before I bring in our experts?
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Janelle Lee Allen. I am one of the gastroenterology fellows here in Detroit, Michigan, originally born and raised from Harlem world, baby. And in addition to that, undergrad at University of Pittsburgh, and went on here at Wayne State University School of Medicine to get my medical degree. And then I went on to University of, or I should say the Ohio State University, to get my internal medicine residency training, and I'm back here again for my gastroenterology and hepatology fellowship.
All right, very good. Thank you much. Dr. Elizabeth, you want to take it away?
Yes, so I am Dr. Elizabeth Johnson. I am a pediatric attending. I work in general pediatrics outpatient. I am originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I went to the University of Virginia for undergrad, and then I made my way up to the amazing city of Philadelphia for medical school. I went to the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. I then made my way up to Detroit for my residency in pediatrics, where I completed that at Children's Hospital of Michigan. And now I am practicing outpatient peds.
All right. Dr. Elizabeth loved the kids.
I love the
kids. She loved the kids. So I'm your moderator. My name is Nicholas Fletcher, Dr. Fletcher, and I'm a psychiatry resident here in the Detroit area, Wayne County, Detroit area. Did my undergrad at Howard University in Washington, D.C., HU, Bison for life. Did my medical degree at Michigan State University, College of Human Medicine, and I am now here practicing in the Detroit area, as I just said. So with that, I would really like everyone to give a big round of applause to our experts who will be helping us navigate the more technical side of our mental health discussion, and kind of bringing us up to speed on really what the challenges are for our community and how we can best tackle them. I'll first start with Dr. Joy Moore Felton. She's a staff psychiatrist in the Cincinnati area. She works on inpatient and outpatient psychiatry services. She did her undergrad at Spelman University. I'll let you go. Also, she did her medical degree in Wayne State and did her residency at University of Cincinnati. And if I'm correct, you were also born and raised in Detroit?
Correct. And I went to Spelman College. Don't want to can't mess up the HBCUs on this forum.
I'm
That's it.
sorry. I'm sorry. You went to Spelman College, okay?
Together.
All right, and thank you for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And next we have joining us is Dr. Ioha. She attended the Women's College of Columbia University in New York City, where she studied neuroscience and behavior. She earned her medical degree at Wayne State University School of Medicine and completed her residency training at Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. She, if I'm not mistaken, is from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yep, correct.
Good
All
job.
right. Thank you for joining us. It is a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as I talked about before, we're going to be diving straight into some of the mental health challenges that we have in our community. And what I'd like to do first is just go ahead and try to set the stage with some of the facts and figures. So mental illnesses are among the most common health conditions in the United States, okay? About 50% will be diagnosed with a mental illness or disorder at some time in their lifetime. 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in a given year. And then 1 in 5 children, either currently or at some point during their life, have a serious debilitating mental illness. And when you put all that together, you start to break it down into some of the more specific disorders and some of the mental illnesses we're talking about. About 1 in 25 Americans will suffer from schizophrenia, bipolar, or major depression. I would like to give an opportunity for Dr. Janelle to kind of throw in a little bit of facts of her own there, right?
Sure. And basically, one of the organizations that is used and well known is National Alliance on Mental Illness. And one of the things that they say is, despite the needs, and as far as our community is concerned, only 1 in 3 Black adults who need mental health care receive it. In addition to that, they say that there is, even a more recent study that showed that 63% of Black people believe that a mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness. As a result, people may experience shame about having a mental illness and worry that they may be discriminated against due to their condition. So tonight is all about trying to dispel the stigma behind mental illness, as well as educate and advocate for more of everyone to be able to get the help that they need in the ways that they need it. With that said, we're going to let the experts move on to talking about, well, what's the difference between mental health and mental illness?
Well, when we talk about mental health symptoms, these are symptoms that really are normal for the human condition. And for all of us at different times of our life, we will experience sadness and anxiety and other symptoms that can be distressful at times. The point at which it becomes a disorder or an illness really occurs when 2 things happen. The symptoms become so distressful for an individual that it causes them sort of emotional turmoil. And secondly, more importantly, there is functional impairment. And when we have those 2, that is really where we cross over from, everyday sadness and anxiety to a disorder where we want to intervene and really reach out for help.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, what I want to do is have you elaborate a little bit on the turmoil. Maybe I'll have Dr. Joy Moore Felton kind of elaborate on what turmoil and impairment is for our audience.
Yeah, sure. Well, Dr. Felton.
Sorry. So the diagnostic manual that we use gives a specific criteria that help us to delineate the different conditions that will cross the line over from a normal sort of mental health reaction and to an illness or a disorder. And typically, when the impairment term is throughout, that means that the distress is significant enough that it impairs them socially. So interaction with people, interaction with family, interaction with work, interaction with colleagues, as well as occupationally. So their behaviors at work, are they reporting into work at all? Are they staying at work for excessive periods of time? And it has to not be the conditions or the combination of symptoms that we see. It can't be as a result of another physiological condition. So those two primary terms have to be met for it to be considered a mental illness.
And so when we're thinking about this, breaking it down, you're talking about people who, when those symptoms tend to become so overwhelming, right, that they can't even deal with what your normal life activities should be, like getting out of bed or taking a shower or caring for yourself or loved ones. So it's not, we all feel sad at times, but it's you're saying it's more than that. It's when it's taken to a level that is just not familiar to yourself or those around you.
Right. I think what's important is the time period, right? Because majority of the conditions within a diagnosis manual, you have a specific time frame. So like if we're just going to talk about depression just for example purposes, you have to have had significant impairment and distress for at least 2 weeks. So when you think about your everyday comings and goings, that's a very long time to be impaired. And not functioning at your best. When you talk specifically about anxiety, generalized anxiety, at least you have to have those specific combinations for at least 6 months. Again, very long periods of time. And so it's important to delineate because a normal mental health emotional response is expected when you have a stressor of some sort in your life, right? But the time period is the key that will separate the symptoms from a normal response or a normal reaction to a disorder.
Okay.
And Dr. Fletcher, if you don't mind, like something.
Yeah, please.
I just noticed that we said that maybe we can clear up a little bit because, in terms of impairment, pointing out that there is a spectrum, like, Dr. Moore-Felton was saying earlier in our conversation, because I very often in the office, I will have a teenager, share with me privately that they are depressed or different things are going on. And when I try to speak to the parent, they'll be like, they're not depressed. They're going to school. They're fine. They can't be depressed. And I have to tell them, like, you can still have some level of functioning, right? When you are depressed. Am I wrong of thinking that? I just want to clarify with that, because people think you have to not be able to function at all.
Right. So as Dr. Moore-Felton mentioned, it is on a spectrum, and you can have, in your example, an individual who is depressed, and for the subjective experience, those symptoms are distressful for them, and so that's a subjective experience, and that can only be judged by the person who's living that experience. And when we talk about diagnosing someone with a major depressive disorder, we won't diagnose them unless there is objective evidence of functional impairment. But that by no means that an individual who has had some level of impairment that they perceive or that is observed by others, it does not warrant intervention. And so, how we intervene, that may depend on sort of the level of distress that the person experiences. But, when we talk about diagnosing an individual with a disorder, those are just criteria that need to be met. But make no mistake, an individual can absolutely experience depression, again, on the spectrum, but something way past normal and not yet considered disorder still needs to be addressed.
Really takes us back to comparing mental health versus mental illness, really, right? Because I think that was the core purpose in even bringing it to this forum, right? There is a cutoff in which a combination of symptoms, time period, impairment will reach the point of mental illness, right? And that's where we come in terms of aggressive mental illness treatment. But you still have a huge conglomerate of experiences within your own mental health by itself. And I think that is where the education and the advocacy work really needs to be done, because I don't think that we acknowledge that our mental health has its own
spectrum.
Some respect on the mental health piece, right? Because we get an understanding of, number one, I'm here and I exist. You have to feed into me what you expect to get out of me. And I think that we push out like we expect output from our mental health. We don't put enough into it on a consistent basis.
Absolutely.
On that,
I could,
say more on
yeah.
that, because I think that's so deep, and just like Dr. Johnson just mentioned, hey, this teenager said, I feel depressed. I don't feel good. I don't feel like I should be feeling. And it kind of got dismissed by the mom because there was a level of functioning. So now we're getting into this mental health, and how do we feed our mental health, and what are the things that people should know about what to do and how to, like you said, put good things in so we can get healed essentially, and be back where we need to be.
Yeah, so I would say, I would add to that, how do you put some respect on my mental health?
Well,
That might be our title.
yeah. Well, first and foremost is really understanding the things that impact our mental health. I mean, how can I explain to you that my mental health has been impacted if I don't know what it is that impacts me in general? So again, there's some level of self-actualization, understanding these things that impact us. So for example, we can talk about sleep as an example. Individuals may not fully understand that our sleep hygiene, the ability to get consistent sleep day in and day out, is very important for our mental health. And when individuals start to see that their sleep patterns have changed dramatically, that may be a sign to an individual, or should be a sign that something may be going on. How we are interacting with those that we love. If all of a sudden, or as time goes on, I start to isolate myself from those that I love, and they notice it, I notice it, I feel more comfortable, by myself. Again, that's another sort of sign or symptom, as we will, that there may be something going on. There's something brewing there. And so before an individual makes their way to mental illness status, there are things that are occurring. There are aspects of their mental health that are really alerting them that something is wrong. We could say the same is true for appetite. We talk about, an individual who, you mentioned the teenager, maybe during this time period, they've noticed that they're eating too much, or they're not eating at all. They don't really have an appetite. They may notice that the things that they used to love to do, they love to hang out with their friends or go, bobsledding.
Yeah.
They stop enjoying it the way they used to. I don't know, but
Yeah.
In order for individuals to truly understand when their mental health is suffering, you got to understand what are the things that impact our mental health. And those are just some, to name a few.
Yeah.
So I like some of the things that you threw out there, because I think some of the things you threw out are evidence of habits and behaviors, right? And I think that your habits and behaviors are the telltale signs that we have to bring more awareness to in order to understand your mental health. Because your habits are what sort of reinforce your behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Behaviors then create the emotional experiences that you have. And so I think the part of the challenge with mental health is you have to zero in on your behavior, which means then you have to zero in on your habits. Nobody really want to pay attention to their habits really on an everyday basis. That's a hard conversation to have on an everyday basis. And then, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is you have to combine your habits and behaviors with your emotions. And I think the emotion piece is challenging. Most of the reason it's challenging is because it's not something that we get a lot of education surrounding it in general, having appropriate conversations, about our emotional experiences and what we're actually feeling.
Right.
A lot of people talk in a one-dimensional realm in this space. So for example, how do you feel? I feel happy. How do you feel? I feel sad. Okay. Is there more to it after that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck. Emotional intelligence is one of the things that we struggle with.
Yes. And I would completely agree with you, because I feel like we got to give one another that space to say, we're so used to that regular template of hey, how are you doing? I'm fine. Okay, good for you. Keep moving. You know, for someone to say, "Hey, how are you doing?" and for someone to be responding with that, "I'm not okay," that means that person has to take on that responsibility. You have to be prepared to give of yourself, right? To if someone says, "I'm not okay."
I agree. So that's where we come in at. And that's why breaking the stigma is so important, because you shouldn't have to share your emotional space with everybody. Like, you're not able to do that on an everyday basis. And so part of the like, and I hate this, that this is a normal thing in our society. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. That's kind of like the gut reaction that people have, the first reaction. And it's false, it's true. Sometimes it's a bold-faced lie. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like useless conversation, but we really don't have time to have a whole vulnerable discussion about what we're feeling when we're walking in the hallway at work, right? And so this is why having an appropriate conversation with your safe space, or with your therapist, or with your psychiatrist, counselor, may be more appropriate, because you are going to need more time, and you're going to need to learn how to be vulnerable.
So I think that's a great segue into we're talking about that. We know that there are these issues that, you know, we need to own when we have these challenges. We have these mental health challenges, and we need to own them. But how do people get out of their own way? In your experience, you know, how are your patients getting out of their own way to either seek help or to be in front of you? How, I feel like that's such a large, such a hurdle for patients to get in front of you in the first place. How have you noticed that patients are getting there, and how would you suggest patients even start that conversation?
Well, part of the issue is that, you know, for as long as, you know, we've discussed mental health, we've normalized distress, we've normalized suffering. Again, because it's subjective, it's the person who is experiencing it that will let you know that it's too much for them. And so, you know, whether we say as a society or as a community, okay, that has been a normalized sort of subjective experience of many individuals. And so at least what I've seen in practice is that as the years have gone on and as the discussion on mental health has increased, it's become safer to talk about our emotions and not being okay. Like we are actually, for the first time in a long time, it's actually okay for you to tell someone on a you know, in passing, I'm not doing so great today, and it not be some abnormal, unusual thing. And so when patients, at least in my experience, patients, when they have come into my office, it is usually come because individuals who care about them raise a red flag and say, something doesn't seem right. Are you okay? And that actually causes that individual to do some inventory themselves. And when they do that inventory, for those who understand that there are resources available to them, they will reach out for that help. And many of them, I will tell you that, you know, I've had patients who come to the office in their, you know, later years of life, not having known that for 20 plus years, they have been depressed, and they only know it after they've had treatment. And it's such an unfortunate thing, because again, we use this analogy, which seems cliche, but you know, you wouldn't want to see a person walking around with a broken foot for any amount of time. And yet we've normalized walking around with depression and anxiety and PTSD and all of these other really, you know, significant mental health disorders. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think what you just said was so key, because, you know, before going into fellowship, and I still see it in my GI practice, I see many people who come in with GI manifestations of untreated anxiety and depression, again and again and again. I've even had people say, well, when I introduced the idea of them, going to see a counselor and a psychiatrist, I've had them say, no, I want you to be able to handle, everything I have. I have a great connection with you. And I have to say to them, I said, we do, but this is a different area of your life, but it's playing into how your GI system is acting. It's playing into, sometimes for some people, irritable bowel syndrome. I have people who have had procedures left and right and who have gone from emergency room visit to emergency room visit to emergency room visit. And really, it's about the fact that they have had critical points in their lives, whether it be trauma or grief, essentially emotional trauma in many different forms. It could be, a terrible encounter. It could be an assault. It could be, the loss of a parent or the loss of a child. And they come in and they begin to say, well, I've always had issues, but when this happened, when I, go through the history, they go to say it became debilitating. It became, I can no longer work. It became, I can no longer function and take care of myself. I can't take care of my family, and it's, they're saying it's something with the GI tract, but when I really drill down, it's something to what happened to them and their inability or maybe lack of access, or either, like we said initially during this whole thing, the shame of wanting to or not wanting to get help for the things. It's easier to say I have upset stomach or diarrhea or I have constipation than to say I'm depressed. So with that being said, I just, what you said about the broken foot was so critical because we get into medicine because we want to help people. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to see somebody turn that corner, whether it be through medicines or through counseling, and then for them to open their eyes and say, I did not know I could feel better. So that's just a beautiful thing what you said.
I think and when I talk to patients, and they're coming in, just like Dr. Janelle was just saying, with a list of complaints, I just try to make sure that they feel that they aren't being dismissed, that I believe you when you say that you are having these symptoms. I do believe you. What I am trying to tell you is that these symptoms are coming because you are having this issue with your mental health. And I remember I had this conversation with a teenager who was in tears and just talking about the daily upset stomach, the daily this, and but you need to do these tests and blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, I was like, my dear, you are depressed. You are depressed. And reminding them, I know I've said this before in some of our other discussions, who are you without your mind? And the power of mental health, truly, right? That you're having very real physical manifestations of what's going on mentally. So when people start to feel as if, okay, I'm not just dismissing the symptoms, sometimes they're a little bit more open to going to see a psychiatrist and talking to someone. But yeah, it takes a support system too of, yeah, I just think it comes down to people not wanting to feel dismissed.
Well, sorry. No, go ahead, honey.
I think that's part of it for sure, but I think what really brings the person in is pain. Mm-hmm. Some type of pain, emotional pain, physical pain. And that pain has now, like Dr. Yoho was saying, we've learned how to mask it as best as we can, but now this pain has become so large that it's not something that they can continue to mask. And so the question Dr. Nicholas asked is, how do they come in? First, acknowledge that you're experiencing pain. Okay, period. You need to acknowledge that it's a thing. I think the misconception in our society is that life is supposed to be happy and live in a happy state without pain at all times. That is a misconception, okay? You will have pain. Yeah. And some pain is normal. Some pain is not. Pain from a trauma, not normal. Pain from the loss of your mother, if that was one of your closest support systems, very normal. Okay, so you're going to experience pain. It is inevitable for you to experience pain. Now the question is, how do you manage it when it manifests? And I think that question is the one that we as a society are still learning to accept as a whole. Because, and I think Dr. Johans right, we've come a long way with one, acknowledging pain, because there was a period where we did not acknowledge it. The mother example that Dr. Elizabeth gave is a good example of a mom not acknowledging her child's pain, right? So we're coming a long way, but we still have some work to do with pain and normalizing it as an experience that we have, normalizing it as a experience that we must learn how to manage better, get better at communicating what it is that we're experiencing, and then seek help when we need it, when it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Joy. Dr. Yo, I wonder if you could speak to, just like Dr. Joy said, there's this, patients come in with pain, right? And if they come into a hospital, they come into, they end up on a medical floor, they have zero problems taking medications that they deem are necessary for them to get better, right? I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find a patient that says, don't give me the medicine I need because, I'm sick with an infection, or I'm having this numbing, this pain, nerve pain. I need some medicine for the nerve pain. How do you approach patients that are hesitant to receive what you deem necessary medications for their mental illness?
Well, again, this is where the beauty of the work that we do is that it allows us to be human first. And a patient comes into the office, and again, our society has, because of we look at sort of path dependency of psychiatry in the United States. At a time, we go back to the 60s and prior to the 60s, where insane asylums were the norm, and then the deinstitutionalization of mental health patients. Patients walk into the office with that history in mind, and they don't want to be noted as crazy. That's what patients come and tell me. I don't want those crazy pills. I don't want that. And so you have to meet them where they're at and understand that there are reasons why they have these preconceived notions about mental health. And one of the things that I have found to be pretty effective, first of all, is to hear them out and understand what has led them to feel that what they're experiencing would not be improved with, medication, but also to educate them. We use this word mental health. Mental health has become this, sort of just, term, but
nebulous. Yeah.
That's physical health. The brain, and what I end up telling patients, the brain is the most sophisticated organ in the entire body. The heart has nothing on the brain. The lungs have nothing on the brain. And so when we talk about mental illness, helping the patient to understand that this part of their body absolutely has to, it endures injury and at times needs treatment. And really actually educating the patient on some of the neurochemical basis, not just of depression and other mental health disorders, but how it connects to other parts of the body. Dr. Janelle mentioned patients coming in with irritable bowel syndrome. We know from how the brain develops that there are a number of cells that as the brain is developing in utero. So again, I'm sorry not to use so many medical terms, but when a baby is developing in mommy's belly, okay, their brain, part of their brain actually goes into their gut. There are cells that migrate from the place where the brain that will become the brain, and they actually go to the gut and they line our gut. And so there is a direct link between the brain and our GI system. And so when patients are depressed, I make sure they understand that the same serotonin receptors that are in your brain that are impacting your mood are in your gut. And when you've been having diarrhea every single time that you get nervous or somebody says anything to you, honey, that's anxiety. And so the education is really a huge part of it. And I think that as individuals, we as a society, we as a community become more educated on, what it is to have these symptoms and the fact that it's a medical condition. There's nothing fancy. It's not some crazy thing. No, I hope I'm answering your question, but
No.
really the heart of it.
Yes.
Medical
Yes, you
it's
absolutely.
okay to get help, by the way, and it's okay to get help. It's okay
Yes.
to
It's critical to get help.
This is where I think comparing psychiatry and neurology is helpful, because you wouldn't have a stroke, right? Lose the physical symptoms from the stroke and not go see the neurologist. So the neurologist is the doctor that we have that specializes in brain function, right? Brain function, right? So, and it's more complicated than that, but let's just keep it simple for these purposes, okay? Brain function. Psychiatry, though, we are the doctors who specialize in emotions, habits, behavior, function, and how it impacts your overall functioning, right? And so when you put it together, we both are working on your brain, but in different aspects of your brain. But the problem with psychiatry that's different than neurology is neurology has been normalized as a regular part of medicine. Psychiatry has lots of different, things that have been reinforced to make us feel like we're the oddball in medicine. But we still here. We still here to help you with your emotions and your behaviors. And a lot of education has to be done to normalize that as a normal human experience.
All right, that was perfect. So I'm really glad we were able to touch on that, because I do believe in my young experience in the field of psychiatry, I see that on a regular basis on the inpatient wards, and that patients will come up, and one of the first things I tell them is, first, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm always going to tell you the truth. I'm always going to tell you why we're doing something, why we're not doing something. But what I want you to realize, and what I want you to understand is, what you've been doing is what got you here. What you've been doing up to this point has not worked, or you would not be here standing here in front of me. And so, part of that conversation is, like you said, educating them, and then building that relationship that they trust me enough to know that, hey, we're gonna do things differently, but we're gonna do it together, and we're gonna try to make sure whatever happens, we're in it together, and we're gonna figure it out. And if medication is something that's necessary, then we're gonna go that route, but also know that we are going to have a goal, an end goal in mind for it as well. And so those are some of the difficult conversations I know I've had. So I really appreciate that both of you kind of bringing that to the table and sharing that with us. I know we're running short on time, so I want to respect everybody's time. One of the things I'd like to kind of get from perspective from both Dr. Joy and Dr. Osa is there a narrative out there in the field of psychiatry and mental health that you just adamantly cannot get on board with, and you want to change their narrative? If you had an audience of people that were like, I'm listening, and you had the opportunity, what would you want them to know that is out there in the mainstream media, is out there in social media, that when you see it, it almost makes you cringe, and you were like, how can we change this? This is not the way it is. Is there anything out there that kind of comes to mind that you would like people to know?
Hello, how much time do we have?
I have like 8 that came to my mind. Which one would you like?
I think one in particular, and again, it touches on what we're talking about. And it's the very, I think, one of the big barrier to folks coming in to see us is that the idea of having a mental health issue, seeing a psychiatrist, talking to a therapist, that there's inherently something wrong with you. Somehow the person has been attached to the disorder. I mean, someone breaks their leg, and we do not say that there's something wrong with the person. It's just, oh man, you broke your leg. We can separate the two. And if there were anything that, I would, and this is always this is a constant conversation, is to normalize what it is that you are going to get out of seeking mental health care. It doesn't make you some strange animal in a zoo. It doesn't put you in the category of folks that cannot cope with life. but rather it equips you with tools to live life at its fullest, to have a quality of life that you're happy with, that you are content with. And there's no way to prove that to a person unless they come in to see us. And all I can tell you is that I've never had a patient that's come in to see me that regretted it. I actually had a patient who said, everybody should have a psychiatrist. And I said, you know what? I think you're right. We should be primary care doctor and psychiatrist. Like you should have, you know, so there.
The one that I'm going to mention here, we touched on my pain one earlier. Okay, like pain and the fact that you're going to have it. It's a normal emotional experience. The misconception is that life is supposed to be happy every day. Just please stop living your life like that. Okay, because it's just not going to happen, or it's not going to be maintained in that way every day, and that is completely normal, right? The other one is that when you are experiencing something and you come to see us, you jumped all the hurdles, you came in and saw us, and now I'm gonna give you a pill, it's gonna go away tomorrow. Okay. Another one, not going to happen. Think about how long you might have experiencing whatever it is that you've been experiencing. Especially, let's say you learned it from your grandma then taught it to your mama, then your mama taught it to you, and now here you don't realize that it's dysfunctional, you're ready to change it, and I'm gonna give you sertraline and it's gonna fix it tomorrow. No, okay, it's just not gonna, we don't have a magic pill for you in the psychiatry office. And that doesn't mean that you have failed. That doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. That means that now we got to learn different tools and strategies to manage through whatever that thing is that is causing the dysfunction and distress. This is where psychotherapy comes in along with the psychiatry. Now, I think everybody needs a psychotherapist, okay? Like, period, paragraph, everybody needs a psychotherapist just to understand their patterns of behavior, the patterns that run in their families, and to recognize them, bring more awareness to them, because so much stuff like lives within the subconscious. And so you're not aware of what it is and why you do what it is that you're doing. And we don't talk about it at the dinner table every day. So psychotherapy is where you'll make those connections more readily. And it's super important to get a good psychotherapist. Let me just throw this one plug in there for psychotherapy real quick, because I think that people think that they're going to walk in, they're going to find a psychotherapist, it's going to be a perfect relationship. And so that's another one of the misconceptions. I like to say, depending on who I'm talking to, I like to say it's like finding the right outfit. So you have to really like change the shirt, change the jacket, change the pants, change the day sometimes in order to make this thing work. And even still, it's not coffee hour. And so you're not going to enjoy every visit that you have with your psychotherapist, because they're going to hash up stuff that you haven't talked about in a long time, or they're going to tell you something that you don't really want to hear in the visit. And if that therapist is doing this, they're doing their job. Okay, those are my two. Sorry, I gave you two, Nicholas.
That was perfect.
I want to just show those clips like in the office to parents, because the part that Dr. Joy, that you just said, that it's not a magic pill, I try to explain that to parents all the time when it comes to ADHD. And I'll have parents come in and be like, they need some Adderall. And I said, they need cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm like, let's go to therapy instead. Or I tell parents, if they're on medication, well, they're still having this problem. Did you try to find the counselor or therapist like I recommended? Well, no, I didn't call them yet. Then my recommendations are still the same. That's that first part. And then I also like that you guys were just saying, again, normalizing that anxiety and depression are real, right? Yeah. I actually have had someone, and Dr. Nicholas and Dr. Janelle have heard me say this. My friend was, tragically killed, and I had someone tell me that anxiety and the depression were a choice, and that my grief was a choice. And I just feel as if that's something I also hear in the office sometimes with parents, that the teenager is choosing to, act this way. So no. Like you pointed out, if somebody had broke their leg, we aren't just saying, nope, it's that person. No, why can we not get the treatment, for anxiety, depression, just like you would treat asthma, you would treat, anything like that. So this was a great talk, guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first I want to thank Dr. Joy, Dr. Osa. You two have been brilliant. I know I have a sense that people are going to want more because we kind of left them hanging a little bit, but that's what they say to do. If you've got them on their toes or got them on their feet, then, keep them wanting more. So I really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your busy schedules to join YBP and have this discussion with Black Docs Talks and give us an opportunity to really connect with our audience and hopefully give them something that, they're able to walk away with and some resources. So thank you, both of you, for joining us. It's really appreciated.
Our pleasure.
Welcome. It was our pleasure.
All right. And so again, some of these discussions that we had can be, very sensitive topics. And, if anyone is out there struggling with any mental health issues or know someone that is, we encourage you to always consider calling the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK. Again, that number is 1-800-273-8255. And we will also be putting in links to different resources on topics we discussed in the comments section below. So go ahead and click that. And also, please go ahead and look back at some of our previous Black Doc Talks episodes that I know you will enjoy. And we have some upcoming episodes in the next month or two to come. So please stay tuned for that as well. So again, from Dr. Elizabeth, from Dr. Janelle, and myself, and YBP, thank you for joining us.